Hello, everyone. Today, I want to talk to you about a very interesting topic that I personally have found to be quite important. And that is the idea that the woman that you marry will not be your wife. This is some advice that I was given from older men in my life, generally speaking, in a negative way. These are men who are in not so great marriages, and they would kind of disparagingly say, "Oh, the woman you're dating, or the girl that you thought you knew is going to change after you marry her." And they would say, "Oh, this would happen after she's had her first kid or after a year or two of being married. She would change. She would change. She wouldn't be the one that you were dating." So they would say something along the lines of, "The woman that you marry is not going to be your wife." And now, after a little over 3 years of marriage, I would agree. The woman that you marry will not be your wife. But as I'm saying that, I'm not saying it in a negative way. Yes, your wife is going to change after you've been married for a long amount of time. Yes, your wife is going to change after she's had children. Yes, of course, your wife is going to change. But that's not always a bad thing. My father told me as I was growing up that the woman that you marry will become how you treat her. If you love your wife and you put her first and you treat her as Christ loves the church, then she will be a very good wife. Even if she has difficulties, even if she has problems, even if she has all sorts of things that are going to cause problems in your marriage, the more you love her as Christ loves the church, the more that you are daily giving your life up for your wife, the more she will love you and the more your marriage will thrive. But if you do the opposite of that, it will go in the opposite direction, of course. If you don't love your wife, if you neglect your wife, or you're constantly going out and doing other things without your wife and not including her in your life in any way, and you're just doing all these other things, then yes, your wife is going to change for the worse. And I think this is just common. I think that it's actually a good thing that your wife changes after you marry her. Do you want her to be constantly stagnant and always the same and never growing spiritually, always being a immature person, never growing and maturing in any way? It's like, of course not. Do you want your wife to continue to be selfish after she has a child and to never think about someone else and all of those things that come along with never having a child or being single for a long period of time? I told my wife that I never realized how selfish I was until we had our first kid. It's quite astonishing even when you realize, like, I am way more selfish than I thought. And my wife said the same thing. We had no idea how selfish we were until we had our first kid, right? So I would hope that you and your wife are not the same people after a few years of marriage as when you first met. I would hope that that's true because you don't want to be the same. Now, people over time will change for the better or they will change for the worse. And the more that you are pouring into your wife and the more you're investing in your wife and caring for her and taking care of her and everything that you need to do as a husband, and you're washing her with the word, right? If you're teaching her the word, the more you're doing that, the better of a wife you're going to have. And this is why I think that the question of who should I marry is as important as the question of how will I treat the woman that I marry? People who have arranged marriages, they often say that their marriage starts off very cold, but over time they grow and become more satisfied in their husband or in their wife. Their relationship starts cold and then over time it becomes hot. But in America, where dating is very popular, what you often see is that the relationship starts off very hot, right? They're passionately in love and they fall in love and then they get married and all that stuff. But then over time, the marriage slowly gets cold and it grows colder and colder and colder, right? This is why the treating of your spouse in a way that is loving out of basically a command at first, which doesn't sound very romantic, but it's true. When you first marry someone, you are commanded to love that person. And, love in the Bible is often a verb. It's not really a feeling. It's a verb. So you are commanded to love, to do things that show that you love your spouse. And the more that you and your spouse work on this over time, the better you will learn to love one another. And this is a good thing. But as what happens so often in these dating relationships, is that people treat the one that they are dating or the one that they had just married as almost a selfish thing. They're saying, oh, that person is there for me. They're there for me. So since they're there for me, as long as I am finding joy in them, as long as I'm happy around them, well, then I'll stay married to that person. But once they stop making me feel happy, well, then I'm not getting what I want out of the relationship, so I would rather get rid of them. And this is why so many people have had so many exes and so many divorces nowadays, because people are treating relationships in a selfish way. Whereas in the Bible, relationships are not selfish. Relationships are supposed to be about giving to the other person. Now, just picture this for a second. Just picture two scenarios. Let's say you have a married couple, right? And both of them are just out for themselves in every possible way. They're out for themselves in their own careers. They're out for themselves in what they can get out of their partner. They're out for themselves in every possible way in a relationship. How long do you think that relationship is going to last? Probably not very long, because the second that person that they are dating or married to, whatever, stops providing for the needs that they have, well, then they're going to be looking for someone else who can fulfill that. And that's what usually will happen. And now let's take another example. Let's say that there are two people who are married, and let's say it's an arranged marriage, just for sakes of this video. It's an arranged marriage. They don't know each other that well, but they get married because they have to. It's arranged. They get married, and both of them go into the relationship with the mentality that I am going to serve my partner. I am going to do everything that I can to make my partner happy, completely selflessly. I'm not going to be thinking about myself. I'm not going to be serving them so I can get something in return. I'm going to do it because God commands me to love my wife, because God commands me to love my husband. That's what I'm going to do. Which one of those relationships do you think is going to be better off? I think that it's obviously going to be the second one, right? The arranged marriage, the one where they have the right view of marriage, the one where even though they don't really know each other, they don't like each other that much, they see that marriage is really about taking care of and caring for another person. And that will bleed into then when you have children, because what happens so often is, as the advice of the old men have given me, that you don't know your wife until she's had her first kid. Well, what they're describing when they say that is that my wife was all mine until she had a kid. And then now she has another person that she's giving a lot of her energy to, and she's not giving it to me like she used to anymore. So I feel like I don't even know my wife anymore. And, I'm not going to deny that women have some changes in their brain after they have a baby. That's definitely true, and I'm glad that they do. But what they're describing is that the wife had a shift in priorities. Now she doesn't have 100% of her time to give to her husband all the time. She has to give some of her energy to her children, which I think is a good thing, right? Of course. And a husband should see that and should take care of his wife all the more, because now she's taking care of the children, right? And this should be how it goes. But if you're in a relationship where it's all about me and what I get out of my partner, what's going to happen is resentment. You're going to say, oh, my wife was so much better before she had a kid, and now she's distracted. Now she doesn't have as much energy anymore because she's giving it to children or something like that. And again, this is a selfish view of things. Now, to go back to the original topic, right? The advice that I was given of you don't know your wife until, you've been married for a while, or the woman that you marry won't be your wife. I am glad that is true. I'll say it again. Just because I want to get this through to you guys as you're, going through life. If you're not married yet and you're looking for someone to marry, I'll say this again. The one you marry is less important than the how you treat the one that you marry. So again, it kind of always, all my advice always comes back to you. Always comes back to the person, right? Because the only person that you can control is yourself. You can't control the other person and what they are going to do. You can only control yourself. So what you put into things is what you're going to get out of things. The more you invest in loving and caring for your wife, the more she will see your self-sacrificial love, and the more she will want to do the same in return. Now, something that I need to caveat all of this advice with is that if you are in the process of looking for a wife currently, you need to marry a Christian woman. You just need to marry a Christian woman. That's going to be advice in a different video when I talk about, where to look for a wife or what to look for in a wife, the characteristics that you should look for. That's in a future video. But I need to say that now because I don't want anyone to just jump off and just go marry some random person and expect everything to be fine. It does matter. It still matters who you marry, but it matters more how you treat the person that you marry. So just a quick preface on that. So that's pretty much everything I wanted to say about this. I just want you guys to understand that the people who generally say, oh, you don't know your wife until you've been married, generally speaking, they have bad marriages. And they're saying it to be disparaging to their spouse. But chances are they're part of the problem as well. They are also being a problem in the marriage because they're probably not treating their wife in the way that they should. And most of these guys will end up in a divorce. And many of them that gave me that advice a couple years ago are currently divorced. So just think about that for yourselves and just think, what am I going into marriage for? Am I going into it for myself, or am I going into it for treating my wife the way that God would want me to treat her? Am I going into it with the mentality of I'm going to treat my wife like Christ treats the church? That's something to be thinking about. Thanks for watching.